Welcome on into Forward Progress presented by Fanduel Sportsbook. I'm your host, Eric Pauly, with our usual cast of panelists, Suma, Judah Fortgang, and Cleve TA of TAanalytics.com. This is your first time here. As always on Forward Progress Monday edition, we will start by recapping Week 8, talking about the futures markets, looking ahead to some week line nines, and ending with Monday Night Football breakdown, along with an SGP cooked up by Judah himself. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel to get in on the chat. We love talking questions. We love talking banter. So make sure to hop in the chat, subscribe, and let's get right into it. So we saw so many fun things yesterday. It was a very fun NFL Sunday. The witching hour of the 1 p.m. windows was absolutely amazing. In the 4 p.m. games, we had a crazy ending to the Washington Commander Chicago Bears game. Now, Suma, this had to be a tilting loss for you. I know that on the show's Forward Progress Wednesday, Best Bet Edition, you had the Bears as one of your best bets. And I'm reluctant to call this a bad beat because obviously a Hail Mary touchdown is a very unlikely situation. But Suma, talk to me. The Bears didn't even deserve to kind of be in that spot in the first place, correct? What did you see from that game?
Yeah, so first of all, the situation itself was probably the most tilting situation I might have all season long. It completely rattled me. However, like you said, the Bears didn't even deserve to be in that spot. They were bad all game. The Commanders sliced them up, and I think they went like 0-4 or something in the red zone. Game could have been over in the third quarter already. Bears offense was non-existing for like 3 quarters, and then Caleb had a few nice plays later in the game. But it would have been a very undeserving cover, but that moment itself was very tilting. Commanders, the Bears lost a few guys along their defensive line. They were without Jaquan Brisker and without Kyler Gordon already to start the game. But I still thought that the Commanders moved the ball pretty well, just until the red zone shot themselves in the foot a few times, penalties, holdings, and then also a few bad plays by Jane Daniels. But I was really, really surprised by that Bears performance. They lost 3 offensive linemen during the game. And then at some point, it was basically Caleb dropping back. Commies were, I think, playing a lot of man coverage on late passing downs. And then Caleb was basically just trying to scramble around pressure and trying to make things happen. Lots of throwaways. So pretty bad outing for the Bears. They did not deserve to win the game. But yeah, that tilting moment will stay for a bit.
Yeah, Tyquan Stevenson dancing around. He's the one who was supposed to be guarding Noah Brown. I'm sure at this point we all saw the video of him, taunting Commanders fans while the play actually was going on. And he's the one who tipped it into Noah Brown's hands for the miracle Commanders win and, of course, cover as an underdog. But, TA, talk to me about your thoughts. Because I saw you on Twitter mentioning how the play before the Hail Mary, the Bears let Washington get a free 12 yards. And those 12 yards, Matt Eberflus said were insignificant, but if you watch what happened, it was anything but insignificant. So yeah, tell me what you saw from that Hail Mary and just general thoughts on the Commanders-Bears game.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious they were going to run that 10-yard outplay. That it was too far away with 6 seconds left to for Jaden Daniels to throw 70 yards, 75 yards in the air to get it to the end zone. So with 6 seconds, that's plenty of time. Only takes 3 or 4 seconds to run a quick out to get a little bit closer. So it made no sense to give them all that room. You can see Eberflus was a little bit flustered on the sideline. Obviously, Tyreek Stevenson, even before the Hail Mary, the play before that, he was talking to the fans. So there's clearly an issue. And, the Bears had timeouts. I don't know why they didn't just call one just to settle everything down and make sure everybody was on the same page. But, Tony Romo was talking about it. Hey, defend the sidelines there. It was pretty clear that that's what they were going to do. And so to allow that really, set the stage for the Hail Mary. So it was an egregious error on Eberflus's part. And it was even worse, his post-game press conference talking about how that play didn't matter. I mean, it was the total difference in getting to a Hail Mary position. So that was pretty egregious. I'll be honest. I didn't have any action at all in that game. So I didn't really watch till midway through the fourth. So generally, I don't have a ton of thoughts. It looked like Caleb Williams struggled. This Washington defense has started to play much better than what they showed at the end of last year and then early this year. They were maybe the worst defense in the NFL for that stretch, but the last handful of games, they've really done a nice job of generating pressure and slowing teams down. I think the 4 of the last 5 opponents have a negative EPA on offense. The Ravens are the only one who has a positive EPA, and that includes the Cardinals and the Bears, who've been pretty hot offensively. So I don't know if there's anything schematic they're doing different. But they've done a nice job of settling down. If they can get at least league average defensive play to go along with this offense, it could be a really good, clearly could be a playoff team and potentially win the NFC East. So I think obviously they got a little bit lucky at the end, but I do think that was obviously a huge win. And going forward, this is definitely a team to be reckoned with.
Yeah, they are fun as hell. And the team, they were talking about it off air. They have like a very college vibe. They're playing for each other in the locker room. Great brotherhood. And Jayden Daniels, of course, playing through injury, which is great to see how, he missed some throws throughout the game and he clearly wasn't himself, but he made the biggest play and he still put up, absolutely great numbers in terms of carrying statistics. But let's keep talking about that Washington defense. Kaj mentioned this in the chat. TA obviously just mentioned it right there. But Judah, we're talking about a defense last year that was abysmal and that started out abysmal the first couple of weeks. This defense is clearly not a pushover anymore. Have you looked at the film? Like, where do you see the biggest improvements in this defense, and what do you expect from them moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the main frame of mind, which is that this defense was horrible last year, and I think many of us, myself included, projected them as a bottom unit, if not the worst unit in the NFL, and they've been anything but that. And I think that matters a lot. The kind of gap between being a 32nd best defense or 30th best defense to 18th best defense. Right? I don't think this is a team that's going to win by virtue of their defense, but when you have an offense as productive as Washington's, having just league average play is extremely important. But I also would kind of note that this is a defense that leads the NFL in pressure rate over the last month or so, and Darren Armstrong was having a great year. He's been dealing with some injury. And I think that you can say that there's a certain element of this is just due to the matchups, as kind of Suma mentioned in some of the comments there. But also, we shouldn't discount the fact that they played well even against poor opponents. Bad defenses, especially those at the very bottom of the league, allow the worst offenses to score against them. Right? I think it kind of works both ways. And I would also just note that it's one thing to kind of look at, the last month of the season and cherry pick a sample, and there's a lot of matchup factors involved there. It's also important to keep in mind that this is a team entering a new scheme, a new system. It takes time for players to learn that. And Dan Quinn has been a really great defensive coordinator. His defenses have certainly performed extremely well over the last, frankly, decade or so. But especially even going back to his time in Dallas. And of course, they have some better talents there. But it's not just completely random. And I think that their ability to generate pressure, they're now 11th on the season, especially as of late, is a function of getting more comfortable in this scheme. And I think that the key point here is that this is not just some pushover defense, but one that can produce, I think, around league average, maybe slightly below league average defense. And that's probably enough for them to seriously compete for a Super Bowl given the state of their offense.
Obviously, a new coaching staff in Washington. Obviously, they got to work this offseason, adding some new talent. They had also some other players who were hurt toward the end of last year, now stepping up in a big way. And Noah Brown, after he caught that Hail Mary, he said in the locker room after when they were giving out game balls, he said, defense, this game is on you, this W. He gave all the credit to that unit. It is important to note, I guess, that, at the end of that game, the defense was not able to hold up, but asking any defense to really hold up for multiple possessions, I'm sure, is not an easy subject. So the ascension of this defense, great storyline. Obviously, Jayden Daniels, great storyline. And obviously, a hell of a way to end an NFL game. So, of course, we'll be monitoring both the Bears and Washington down the stretch as we get closer to the playoffs. But let's move over to TA's favorite team, the Cleveland Browns, and Jameis Winston. Now, TA was all over this. If you're not have access to the TA's work, clevelandanalytics.com, amazing resources there. and he actually called Winston passing leader. We have to talk about the upgrade. We see all the statistics. Deshaun Watson obviously was horrible. Games not quarterbacked by Deshaun Watson under Stefanski and this Browns team. These passers are going absolutely nuts. Yeah, what is an upgrade on the Browns team with Winston under center?
Yeah, to be fair, I've had a rough start to the year. This has been a tough season, so it's one of the few calls I got right. But we'll take it. It was one of those where Jameis. I don't think the market was properly accounting for the Jameis experience and just the value that he adds to this offense, being able to push the ball down the field, actually throw, make tight window throws. The thing about Deshaun Watson is, he wasn't actually turning the ball over, like, ever. He wasn't throwing interceptions. He wasn't fumbling. He was just taking a ton of sacks, bailing out of the pocket, and he wasn't pushing the ball down the field. He wasn't even trying. And so, the thing with Jameis is he'll try to squeeze the ball in there. I think there was 3 or 4 interceptions that were accounted for as drops or turnover worthy plays. And even in that last drive, Kyle Hamilton had one right in his hands. I don't know how he dropped that, but that's what you get with them. So you get the good and the bad, and it's worth it. Honestly, that's what Joe Flacco did last year. He pushed the ball down the field, had a bunch of 300-yard games. The Browns were top 5 in explosive pass rate last year with Flacco. But he also, had 2 pick sixes against Houston in the wild card games. But, that's better than what we were seeing with Deshaun Watson. So, it gives us this offense life. And, the defense is not elite like they were last year, but they're still top half of the NFL, when they're all healthy. And, this makes this team a lot better. The look-ahead line, again, that's, an illiquid market and whatnot, but it was 4.5. Now it's, I think, open back to 2.5 with the Chargers. So you could see the market is definitely, adjusting to Jameis and the Browns. But I do think that a 2 to 3 point adjustment is likely right, for this Browns team with Jameis Winston going forward. And we'll see. They've got a healthier offensive line, all but DeJuan Jones at left tackle over Jed Wills is the only kind of non-starter from the beginning of the year. But that's essentially a wash at this point. So they're healthy on the O-line. They got Nick Chubb back, and obviously they got a quarterback now who's going to be here for the rest of the year and is going to push the ball down the field. So it gives them a lot more outs on the from an upside perspective. And I'll be curious because this is the last game this week against the Chargers before their bye week, which is when the trade deadline occurs. So I think this is going to determine whether they're going to sell or not. If they win this game, I think it'd be really hard for them to start selling off pieces. Whether right or wrong, I think from a locker room perspective and a fan perspective, they probably won't sell. But if they lose this game, heading into the bye, I think everyone essentially is up for grabs from guys like Zadarius Smith, et cetera. So this is obviously a pivotal game for them for the rest of the season.
With the healthy O-line and Jameis Winston back there slinging the football, at least we could say Browns games will be entertaining. It might not always lead to some big touchdowns. There could be some interceptions thrown in there, but we know they'll be pushing the ball down the field. So definitely worth noting there. But Suma, let's talk about a team that is not fun to watch, and unfortunately your favorite team. And though they should not have lost this game, I saw the statistic that I forgot exactly what the metrics were, but situations where the Jets basically outplayed the Patriots much as they did. Those teams won like 700 times, and the one loss was this New York Jets team on Sunday. Talk to me about what you see from the New York Jets and obviously how they're, in a very tough position to try to make a run moving forward. And also talk to me about Drake May and what you saw before the concussion.
The stat was no turnovers, hold the opposing team to less than 250 yards and score at least or more than 20 points yourselves. And never has a team lost a game since 1940. So I don't know whether you caught the Mike Francesa rant basically after the game yesterday. It was also epic. I watched this game in the morning, and it was not like the Jets played really, really bad. Their defense was not good at all. May had a very good start to that game. Then Brissett had, I think, 2 very decent scoring drives. Also, the Pats had 1 great punt return. But overall, the Jets should not have lost this game to Jacoby Brissett. If May stayed in the game and May had a decent performance, okay, that's variance. May might be significantly better than we all thought coming into the season. Even with a supporting cast, great. But then they lose Drake May, and you cannot lose to Jacoby Brissett. It's just not possible. I mean, just look at the fourth down decisions by Jeff Urbick. 4th and 3 from the New England 40-yard line. They punted the ball. I mean, what is happening? Even a little bit later, 4th and 9 from the 40. Like, either let Zulain try a long field goal or just go for it. What's the upside of gaining 20 yards of field position against Jacoby Brissett? I just don't get it at all. 4th and 1 from the, I think, New England 11-yard line later in the game. They kick the field goal, and then you lose to Jacoby Brissett. I mean, we don't need to talk about the Jets again on the show because their season is over. They suck. But, I mean, let's talk about Drake May. Drake May, I think he had 2 really good games so far, considering that it's been his career games 1, 2, and 3. He also had a great start to the Jets game, really short off his legs. I think like it's a difference when you compare May and Brissett when it comes to handling muddy pockets. May knows how to handle pressure better. He knows when to take off. Really refreshing to see, and it also immediately feels like he makes those guys around him better. So pretty encouraging. Unfortunately, he had that concussion, which did not look that bad. So we will see whether he plays next week. But Drake May has really looked the part so far, I would say.
Yeah, and Kod's making an interesting point that defensive-minded coaches making terrible fourth down decisions, it seems. You would think that at this point, this juncture, that teams would invest in having an assistant coach who is in charge of some of these decisions, while head coaches can focus on, obviously, the entire team, or if they are focusing on coordinating that defense. 2024, you would think that that'd be set in stone, but I guess we still are a year or so at least away from that. And I hate to do this to you, Suma, but we will be talking about the Jets in about 15 minutes, so we're going to have to talk about that Thursday night game. But, Judah, the Detroit
Can we get them off prime time already? Like when is this thing? Oh, I mean, this is all season. I just every week I turn my head. Prime time. When's the last game? Is it next week? Is that it?
It better be at this point. I actually saw. I think they're supposed to play the Colts in a little bit. Maybe I think it was like week 11 or 12, and that's still in the flex window. So hopefully we can get the NFL to flex that one out of prime time. Nobody wants to see Anthony Richardson going against that New York Jets team, but. Let's talk about the Detroit Lions. Judah, all the talk has been about how good this offense has been, how Jared Goff and the Lions have more touchdowns than Jared Goff has incompletions over the last couple of games. But you're keying in on this defense, and that's something that has kind of gone under the radar as it wasn't expected to be a great unit and hasn't been playing like a great unit. Talk to me about the Lions defense.
Yeah, I think they're right before the Vikings game 2 weeks ago, when Aiden Hutchinson was out for the season. I think there was a lot of discussion of like how well does this defense hold up, and I think that certainly after the beating the Vikings and then again on Sunday just dismantling the Titans, I think the narrative is just like the Lions are a house. This offense is really good, but there are some concerning signs about this defense. They allowed 7.5 yards per play to the Vikings in their win. They allowed 5.9 yards per play to the Titans. They were actually outgained on a per play basis by a full yard. Now, some of that has to do with the fact that the Lions built up such a huge lead that they effectively were just running out clock and not playing their full offense. But this is also the Titans offense, which has not been able to get anything going. It was perhaps their best offensive performance of the season. And the underlying metrics don't look great either. They're allowing a ton of explosive plays over the last 2 weeks. Their pressure rate has fallen off a whole bunch. I think in a different game state, in one that they basically don't have one of the greatest special teams performance outliers in NFL history, the narrative is very different. And I think I want to be early to the fact that this defense has really fallen off a lot. And I think will continue to fall off given just like they have no one playing edge right now. And that makes their secondary especially vulnerable. I don't think this is a great defense. And I will be looking forward to some spots in the coming weeks to try and bet against that.
We'll be talking about the Lions heading to Lambeau shortly, so we can pause those thoughts and get back to them in a little bit. But let's talk about an offense or a quarterback that is the opposite of accurate and fun to watch. Anthony Richardson. Not only was he one of the most, or is currently one of the most awful quarterbacks in terms of completing passes that he's expected to complete, He also had a play where he sat out for a play because of fatigue. Now, I don't want to make that too big of a deal, but to me, I think that's a pretty big deal. Can you play AR-15 when you're the Colts in a playoff hunt when you know you have Joe Flacco on the bench who can win you football games?
Tough decision. Shane Steichen said today that everything's on the table or something. So we will see whether he really thinks about it going forward. But to be fair, when you look at the final box score and his incompletion line, it was not as bad as it looks in the box score. There were several plays where the offensive line got harassed immediately, and there were also some plays where defenders just made a poor effort, and he actually hit those guys in the hands. So final stat line is not really how the game played out, but it feels so hard, this offense. I actually believe, not a all 22 guy, but I actually feel like there are lots of open guys in the scheme by Shane Steichen, but it just feels so hard when Anthony Richardson is actively trying to complete a forward pass. And the problem is that it might be the greatest athlete ever to play the position, but they are not using him as a runner either, or not that much as I think they should. I think with that guy also to give that offense much more of a floor, you should probably call 6, 7, 8 designed runs per game. And that really feels so inconsistent and hard to move the ball down the field. And we saw it with Joe Flacco. Immediately, that passing game looks way more fluid, way more dynamic, hitting those guys, completing passes. So I don't know. I think you probably cannot go to Joe Flacco without an injury, but if we see 1 or 2 more games of this, I don't think Shane Steichen has another chance, to be honest.
Anthony Richardson finished this game with a negative 24.8 completion percentage over expected, 32.3 actual completion percentage, 15.8 average depth of target. So, he was trying to fling the football, but obviously, completing passes is step one to making your offense go. And like you mentioned, with the inability for him to run the ball, obviously he has been injured a bunch of times since coming to the league just last year. So maybe they're trying to be cautious, but it's hard to unlock a player's full potential when his best skill is not being utilized. So definitely worth noting. But that's actually a great segue into the AFC playoff picture. We have teams like the Denver Broncos, the aforementioned Colts, and the Los Angeles Chargers sitting in playoff spots halfway through the season. TA, this is not what we expected, and this is not fun, right? Talk to me about how you're viewing the current AFC playoff picture in terms of wildcard teams.
Yeah, I mean, between the Bengals and the Dolphins, Browns, Jets, all a lot of the teams that we all thought would be competing for a playoff spot are all three wins or less, and so we got teams like you mentioned, Broncos and Colts and Chargers, not really the highest quality of teams that have benefited from a lot of an easy schedule for essentially most of these, but they've taken advantage, so you have to give them credit. But I think it does offer some opportunity. I do think the Bengals, even though they lost yesterday, sitting at 3-5, they're only one game out of the last playoff spot with the Colts, 1.5 out from the Chargers spot at number 6. And if you look at the remaining schedules, they have one of the easier remaining schedules in the NFL, and they do get to play. They play Denver and they play the Chargers here in a couple of weeks, so they have the opportunity to win some of those tiebreakers. I mean, they got the Raiders coming up. And then if you look at the end of the year, I mean, at Dallas doesn't look nearly as daunting as it might have before the season. They got the Titans, the Browns, the Broncos, and even the Steelers twice. So they've got an opportunity still. I don't think the season's lost. Obviously, they haven't looked all that impressive, but without T. Higgins, you've lost two of your 5 losses have been without T. Higgins. Actually, 3 of your 5. I do think that this is when healthy, and hopefully he can come back this week. I think they've got an opportunity there. Otherwise, Denver, give them credit for winning these games, but they're facing some major cupcakes. Their schedule tightens up big time here the rest of the way. I think they've got the second toughest schedule remaining in the NFL based on in Predictable's market ratings. The Colts are again, they've got an easier schedule. I'm not sure how good they are. So I do think there's an opportunity there for Cincinnati here to make up some ground. And I do think from a viewing perspective, a non-biased viewing perspective, you would like to see a team like Cincinnati with Joe Burrow in there versus a team like Denver or the Colts. So I do think there's, the Bengals are plus money here to make the playoffs in the AFC. So there is an opportunity there. I think that that could make some sense. And, they've got the Raiders coming up here. So big favorites. So, obviously grabbing them now might be a better look before next week when, the Broncos probably lose to the Ravens. You got the Chargers in a tough game in Cleveland, and you got the Colts as underdogs in Minnesota. So Cincinnati can make up a lot of ground in 1 week. So this might be the last time you can get them at plus money for a while.
Definitely worth noting. We'll put a pin in next. We're going to revisit that very briefly as we talk some futures. And we have one last takeaway before we go into the rest of the futures, week 9, and of course, Monday Night Football. So you very vaguely wrote in the group chat that you have some LAC takes. So lay it on us. Talk about some takes you have on the current Los Angeles Chargers team.
Yeah, so coming out of the bye week, they went into their bye with back-to-back losses against Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Also, a lot of injuries, and then out of the bye week, they're 2-1. But it's not games that you particularly talk about the next week. Very, very underwhelming games. Beat the Broncos. Should have won against Arizona, I would say, and then beat the Redlar/Hina Saints yesterday. However, I will say, I think that the Chargers are adjusting. First 4 weeks of the season, they went super run heavy, could not run the ball whatsoever on early downs efficiently. They had a few breakout runs, but they weren't really efficient and consistent on early downs. And then since the bye week, the Chargers are actually 4th in neutral situation pass rate. So there was clearly a shift, and they must have admitted that the approach that they were trying was not working. And I think right now Justin Herbert is playing out of his mind. Yesterday, sick performance against Arizona, sick performance. I mean, if Jalen Reagor does not fumble the ball at the 2-yard line or whatever, they are likely, or they would likely be 5-2 right now. And I think it's refreshing to see that guys like Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, with their let's pound the rock on early downs approach, say, okay, it's not working. Let's just let our superhuman quarterback try to throw the ball on early downs. Offensive line has been getting healthier. Trade deadline next week. I would not be surprised if they are in the market for a wide receiver. So let's see what happens. But I think this team looks really, really good right now. I'm very impressed by Jesse Minter on the defensive side of the ball. Granted, it wasn't a very easy schedule so far. However, their defense looks better than expected, especially their run defense. They're getting healthier overall, and now really saying we want to put the ball in Justin Herbert's hands. That's very promising to me.
Yeah, very well said. And I think it has the Chargers' success, like you mentioned, like Justin Herbert has been playing so well. I feel like he has not been getting the recognition as a lot of these other quarterbacks. It's, I guess, considering who he's working with, but to have those dogs up front to block for him, and he is absolutely performing. His passing prop lines the last couple of weeks have been egregiously low, and he's been flying over them. And as we talk about a guy who's clearly one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League, so definitely worth keeping an eye on the Chargers as we head to the middle of the season stretch, which I cannot believe we've made it there. Before we talk about some futures markets, we have to shout out our sponsor, Fanduel Sportsbook. Kick off this NFL season with a win on Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. So easy to use, great user interface, an amazing array of different wagers you could take. And right now, all customers get a profit boost every single NFL game day. That means you can pump up your gridiron winnings multiple times a week. And today, for Monday Night Football, we have a same game parlay profit boost token. FanDuel has tons of ways you can get in on the NFL action. You can bet on money lines, spreads, player props, and more. Plus, with super simple live betting, lightning fast bet settlement, and instant withdrawals, FanDuel makes betting on the NFL easier than before. Just visit FanDuel.com/forwardprogress to download FanDuel today. Must be 21 plus and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including token expiration. See terms for both offers at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's talk about the futures markets. Tia, you already mentioned the Bengals, but I guess, Jason, let's pull up the market just so we can get the exact lines of what you're looking at. Tia, are you going as far as looking at the division for the Cincinnati Bengals, or you're looking just at playoffs, regular season wins? Where are you looking predominantly for your Bengals futures that you were interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I just think we talked about the bottom of the playoff picture. I would just look to make the playoffs. I think that's the that makes the most sense at plus. It looks like plus 118. I do think that based on their schedule coming up, based on the fact that they play between the Chargers and the Broncos, they play a couple of teams right in front of them, and hopefully they get back T. Higgins. Whether they may not even need him this week, obviously against the Raiders, so you might maybe it takes an extra week. I just think that they've got the pedigree and the upside here to get enough wins here with their schedule to be able to make the playoffs. So I just think from the value perspective, I don't really see anybody else outside of the playoff picture right now. I mean, Miami maybe, but they've got they got a tough one coming up here. They're going to be really falling behind the 8 ball when it comes to the playoffs. And there's really nobody else. I mean, the Browns, Jags, like none of those teams are. I don't think are going to be able to make up enough ground. And the Browns do have a really tough schedule as well. So I think Cincinnati makes the most sense just to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to catch the Ravens either. But from a playoff picture, getting plus money, I do think it is a good look here.
Understood. And now let's flip over to the NFC, TA. We saw the Los Angeles Rams at home. Puka Nacua talking about, is he going to play? Is he going to be a decoy? How many routes is he going to run? Puts on a clinic. Cooper Kupp also back in the lineup. And we got another glimpse of how good this Rams offense can be when they have their big three, or I guess big four with Stafford, Kupp, Kyron, and Puka. Are the Rams worth taking a shot on to make the playoffs in the NFC, TA?
Yeah, maybe. I think of all the teams, they've got a lot of upside with everybody back, or with the receivers back, with Kyron Williams. Remember, this was the number 1 or 2 best offense from an EPA perspective and success rate when you look last year when they had Nacua and Kupp and Kyron Williams all on the field at the same time. So they're there this year, and their defense is getting better. Replacing Tre'Davious White really helped. Getting back Darius Williams, their number 1 corner, and then the young pass rushers, Jared Verse, et cetera, are doing really well, creating especially quick pressures. I do think they have the upside here again in the pedigree to make a run. It's tough. The NFC is a much tougher group to break into versus the AFC. There's a lot of good teams ahead of them, but I still think the Cardinals have a little bit of they're a little bit flimsy from that perspective. You got the Niners ahead of them, and you've got the Bucks, who I think we saw yesterday. Their defense just is not. They're not able to stop anybody, and they don't have. Obviously, they're not going to have their receivers back for most of this year. So I do think that the Rams can jump ahead of them. Seattle. They've got obviously a big game here this week. Now I see that they flipped to the favorite in some places. So, I think that, they can, if they win that game, obviously they've got a big leg up on the road in Seattle from a tiebreaker perspective. And they get to face the Cardinals at the end of the year as well. And they get to face them at home. And the Packers, who knows what's going to happen with Jordan Love? They've got a tough game with the Lions this week. Love continues to be banged up, and it's not been the most impressive run here, especially on defense. So I do think they're vulnerable. I think the Rams have the talent and the upside amongst all the non-playoff teams. So, maybe instead of just doing to make the playoffs, I think Suma might like this one, to win the NFC and, get a little bit of, the tail outcome, if you will, on the upside. They might be worth taking a look at from that perspective.
Definitely understood. And if you look at the current playoff picture in the NFC, right now the wild card teams, Arizona leading that NFC West. So as you just mentioned, there could be some upside. Green Bay at 5, Minnesota at 6, and Philly at 7. Definitely a lot of talented football teams in this group compared to the AFC. So it's definitely going to be a fun stretch of games as we head toward the playoff picture, because there are some teams where we could see the 49ers and Seattle are both out of the picture. The Rams are out of the picture. How this is going to transpire, we shall find out, and it's going to be a lot of fun getting there. But let's talk about some Week 9 matchups. There are a lot of fun games. And we're going to start out, unfortunately, with Thursday night and the New York Jets, who they're shoving down our throats in prime time. Houston, they're playing the Texans right now. Houston's laying 1 on the road at Fanduel Sportsbook. Obviously, records do not dictate what the lines are going to be. I saw some banter on the timeline that how can they only be not 1.5, but obviously records don't matter here. Injury is also a factor for Houston. We know that Nico Collins is out. Stephon Diggs suffered an injury. And on the Jets side, we've seen some players go down in the last couple of weeks. Stuma, at this point, I'm sure you want the Jets to lose because you still have your first-round draft pick, and the playoffs are obviously a little bit of a pipe dream. But what do you think about this opener, and talk to us holistically about this Texans-Jets Thursday night matchup?
Yes, I think the spread seems completely right when you consider the Houston Texans injuries you mentioned already. Kenyon Green was benched yesterday, and then his replacement, Jared Patterson, left with a concussion. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tim Settle left the game with a calf injury. Both starting linebackers were out yesterday. Not sure whether they can get cleared on a short week. Aziz Al-Shahir is on a, I think, knee injury. Henry To'oTo'o concussion might clear in time. Don't know. Jimmy Ward's still out. Callum Bullock left the game yesterday with a shoulder injury. So Houston is very short-handed. Fortunately for them, they play the Jets and not a different team. I would not be surprised if the under took a little bit more money, because both offenses are very, very underwhelming when it comes to success rate, moving the ball consistently, moving the ball on early downs. I think that the Jets' offensive line will be completely overmatched by that Texans front four. So would really not be surprised if we saw rather a lower scoring affair, lots of 3-and-outs, lots of drive stalling. The under took some money recently, I think, when I look at Spankouts right now. But I would not be surprised if we saw a little bit more.
Definitely understood there. And we also know CJ Stroud has not played to his potential. We've discussed in past shows how obviously some of that's just regression. Some of that is also the play calling and, of course, the injuries as well. But interesting game on Thursday night where we get another primetime Jets game, just what we all wanting to see. But let's keep going. We have the Rams and the Seahawks. TA, of course, just made a case for the Los Angeles Rams potentially being a good team to look at in the futures markets. Seattle coming off a loss in Buffalo that TIU actually called correctly, and that being a more difficult spot for Seattle in terms of matchup rather than it was a travel spot for Buffalo. So great handicap there. But how are you handicapping this one with Seattle laying 1.5 at home in a key divisional game in Week 9?
Yeah, I think it's a good matchup. I don't no bet on it or anything. Still have to dig in,
of course,
more on it. But I just think obviously we saw, Geno Smith just continues to make mistakes. They were at the goal line and they go for on 4th down correctly, and he gets tripped over by his center. They turn the ball over a lot. It was just a lot of errors that you hope you can clean up here going forward. But I just think that the way the Rams are constructed now, getting everybody back, you get extra rest for Kupp and Nakua. It's a tough matchup for the Seattle defense. I am curious to see how Mike McDonald plays it. Last year, obviously with the Ravens, the Rams did kind of pick them apart defensively. It was one of the worst performances for Baltimore all year. So that's going to be a nice chess match, but I would lean to the Rams' way right now. All things being equal, I just think it's going to be a really good game. I'm curious kind of who closes. It looked like the Seattle opened up kind of 1.5 point favorites, and it looks like the Rams have gotten some money, and it's either flipped or you're paying heavy juice on the Rams right now. So my guess is that will move towards the Rams side a little bit more here going forward for the rest of the week. But I just think it's just an overall entertaining game, and clearly from a futures perspective, it's a big game because that's whoever wins that is going to get a leg up here in one of the final potential playoff spots. So just a really good matchup, I think, overall.
Yeah, absolutely massive game. Ton of time for this market to mature, develop new information, and of course see where this line is going to close. So of course keep that on the back of your pocket. But Detroit, Green Bay, the Packers plus 3.5 at home on FanDuel Sportsbook. I think this was 4.5 right before the show, if I was not mistaken, on FanDuel. Maybe some money just came in there. But Judah, you've mentioned earlier in the show about how you're concerned about the Lions defense. And now they're probably playing the best offense that they've played in the last couple of weeks, certainly in the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. And of course, it's on the road. And as we know, Jared Goff loves his, dome stadium environments. One of the few situations where he'll be out in the open air. What do you make of this number at open, and which way do you see this number going?
Yeah, I mean, I think this number goes where the health of Jordan Love is. I don't think anyone really knows at this point. We know he avoided a seriously long-term injury, and he's likely not going to be out, at least unless something changes for a couple of months. But whether the injury is week to week or day to day, I think remains to be seen. And I think that's probably going to drive the price. But I think we can talk about this game conditionally, at least if we assume that Love is healthy or that Love is out. And I think that certainly if Love is out, the total at 47.5 seems very high, not only because of Love's ability to move the ball downfield in the Packers offense, but also just the style of offense that the Packers run. I think we're going to become a much run heavier team. And whereas the Lions do have one of the best run defenses in football, they have taken a bit of a step back with some of their injuries over the last few weeks, and just the gravity that Malik Willis carries as given his ability to rush, I think can kind of transcend certain matchups. That isn't to say that it's a perfect matchup and they'll be able to run at will, but I do think this is a team that can have success even against a Lions rushing defense, and I think that is true in a spot where Willis starts. But also, and this works for both ways here, I think the Packers defense has been one of the best units in the NFL over the last month or so. Again, we want to talk about defensive coordinators. It's one thing to improve as you go along and just kind of random, knowable teams. This is a team with a new defensive coordinator in a new system. It's not that shocking for them to improve as the season's gone along. And by virtually any sort of metric you want to use, this is a Packers team that has been great. And it's not simply on the backs of turnovers, though they have had plenty of those. And Xavier McKinney's got something going on intercepting passes. So I like the under just because I think that the Packers can slow down the Lions offense. And then you can say all you want about Jared Goff in an outdoor game. But I really, really would like this under if it's Malik Willis. And I think the Packers side, even if we get Jordan Love back here, talked about my concerns about the Lions defense. And I think the Green Bay side, especially on defense there, is particularly underrated right now.
Certainly. And the good news is that the Packers have announced that from the MRI, it has shown that he has avoided serious injury. He'll get treatment this week. And the belief is that he will have a chance to play in week 9. We obviously saw not the same injury, but Washington play very coy with their young quarterback this past week, who of course ended up playing. We'll see if the Packers do the same thing. Of course, apples to oranges in terms of what the injury was. But Packers practice on Wednesday, and we'll see how or where Jordan Love ends up on that practice report. And TA also mentioning 56 in rain right now expected in Green Bay on Sunday. And we know Jared Goff does not like the conditions. So we'll have to keep in mind, of course, keep up with radio forecasts and see if the radars are showing that rain to continue. But we have one more game before we talk about Monday Night Football, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars Philadelphia Eagles game. Jaguars came back, covered the spread as great teams do, like the Jacksonville Jaguars you know and love, but of course lost outright this past week to the Packers, who lost Jordan Love. And the Eagles finally looking like they're putting some things together. We were talking about how this offense, despite their success in New York, did not look great, but they go into Cincinnati and get a massive win. But TA, as always, injuries are such a huge thing to handicap, cluster injuries to positional groups, obviously injuries to key players. Where do you think this number is going to end up with Philly currently laying 7 in the Jaguars injury report? Not probably looking so hot.
Yeah, this is the time of year that just paying attention to these injuries it matters so much. Obviously, compared to early in the year, you get all these clusters that can impact the game. So I mean, Jacksonville got completely decimated during the game. They lost Christian Kirk. He's out for the year. Brian Thomas Jr., that's going to be a question mark. He hurt his chest. There's one report from Jeremy Fowler that said that he could be out a couple of weeks. And then like 10 minutes later, a Jags reporter said that, no, that's not true. So, we'll see if he plays or not. But obviously that's a huge target, especially down the field that Trevor Lawrence would be missing. And then Gabe Davis got hurt too with his shoulder injury. So you have like all three receivers potentially out, at least one for sure. And, who knows what happens with the offensive line. Ezra Cleveland and I think Brandon Scherf also got hurt during the game. So just a completely decimated offense on top of the fact that, almost officially their season, probably is over after that loss yesterday. Tough loss. And, I don't even know if they're going to keep Evan Ingram, that he could be a trade candidate this week. I think it'd be smart for a team to take a look at a guy like that. So a lot of question marks, both physically and just, kind of the mental state of the Jags right now. And Philly just keeps, chugging along. No one's giving them much credit at all. I think a lot of people are sleeping on them. They're not really taking them seriously as a contender, and all they do is keep winning. It's not as sexy as it had been in prior years. They're not, throwing all over the place. It's a lot more of a run heavy approach the last handful of games ever since their bye week, but they're getting the job done. They're running the football and they're, creating explosives down the field with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. So they're kind of doing enough. And so I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I think the Brian Thomas injury could keep this thing off of 7 one way or another, if he plays or not, but it's going to probably settle right around the 7 number. It opened, I think, 6 last night and got money immediately towards the Eagles side, assuming all of these injuries were severe. And then now it's kind of, it's probably going to settle in one way or another based on the offensive line and Brian Thomas, but definitely an interesting line to keep an eye on with the injuries along with some others.
Yes, certainly. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence's season has not been great, and if he loses some of his best weaponry, we can't really expect all too many good things coming out of Jacksonville, especially considering what we've seen so far this year. But let's wrap up and finish off with Monday Night Football. We are so fortunate to see Daniel Jones and Russell Wilson on primetime. I don't know what we would do without this football game. On the Sports Equinox, nonetheless, this is the NFL's contribution to the Equinox. Giants at Steelers. I've seen a lot of movement. This was at 5.5 at points. I don't know if it got down to 5, but currently at FanDuel Sportsbook, Giants catching 6 on the road in Pittsburgh. Total 36.5. Suma, start us off. Do you have just break it down for us? Of course, you don't need to put out any plays or anything here, but what's your handicap or your thought process on how this Giants Steelers game is going to pan out?
To be completely honest with you, I don't have too many thoughts at the current price. I don't want to pass post. So I thought that I probably agree with the market move since the early week. It felt like a very high number for the Steelers to be laying. Some folks would say Tomlin as a home dog, but not Tomlin as a favorite of -6 or more. I just think that the Steelers probably have reached a very high price in the marketplace, and the Giants might be in a buy low spot. I think current market price is probably exactly around my fair price, so really not a strong opinion. But I think this game, with the way the New York Giants defensive line has been playing, I think the Giants defense can actually make it a pretty competitive and close game. The Steelers, they had a lot of big plays against that Jets defense, but there was also some luck involved. I think that the Giants defensive line should be able to get more going at the line of scrimmage and maybe make Russell Wilson's life a little bit harder. And yeah, just rooting for a close game here.
Definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned that defensive line for the Giants, that potential mismatch in the trenches, because we talked about that last week, potentially being an edge for New York, but that did not transpire. And of course, some of those lucky plays. TA, do you agree with Suma that trench mismatch could lead to this being a closer one, or are you viewing this game differently?
By pure ratings, you could probably make the case that the Giants are the right side here. that it's really hard to lay this amount of points with a team like Pittsburgh. I just think from a matchup perspective, the Giants have no left tackle. I mean, without Andrew Thomas, it's a huge vulnerability against this pass rush of the Steelers at night, where you're going to need a silent count. Like, that's just death against TJ Watt and Highsmith. So from a pure matchup standpoint, it's hard to see New York consistently being able to create, long sustained drives. They haven't done it all year, and you're doing it without, like I said, without your left tackle against, this great pass rush. It's just hard for me to back a team like that. That doesn't create explosives either. I mean, they have their second lowest explosive pass rate in the NFL. So you can't create explosives, and you're likely not to create, long sustained drives, because you're going to have too many negative plays with that offensive line. I just can't make the case that it makes sense to back the Giants here. But I'm not going to lay this many points with the Steelers either. So it's just kind of like just stay away and maybe look at some props. I think maybe Pickens is going to, if he can get some one-on-one matchups against that secondary. The Giants are one of the worst teams in the NFL against outside wide receivers. That's an opportunity to maybe take a look at his prop. Calvin Austin had a nice game last week. He had 22% target share, 70 air yards. He's in the slot. The Giants are actually top 8 in the league against slot receivers for whatever reason. I don't know if there's a schematic reason for that. Maybe it's Drew Phillips, the rookie out of Kentucky, who's done a really nice job in his first year, but generally no play for me. I just think it's kind of an ugly game, and maybe look at some props. I just think that the Giants, if they're going to move the ball, they're probably going to have to use Daniel Jones in the run game a lot more, and then rely on short, quick passes. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is the leading target when facing pressure for Daniel Jones. Not really the most efficient targets, but he'll probably get a decent amount of looks if Jones has to get the ball out quick. So maybe look at him from a reception standpoint. But that's all I've got.
No, definitely noted. No need to handicap a game that you have nothing that you like. But Judah, TA ended that segment talking about some props, and you're our designated prop tail outcome guy. You can follow Judah on Twitter at Throw the Damn Ball, damn DAM, no DAM, no N. Make sure, because he always posts some amazing charts of some just such insightful data. But Judah, talk to us about your handicap of this game, and let's cook up a same game parlay.
Yeah, I think that kind of what everyone else said is true. I don't have that much on the side, and I can see this playing out a bunch of different ways. But I think the common narrative here is that, this is such a great Steelers pass rush against a Giants offensive line that is obviously struggling. Both of those things are true. And I think we just saw kind of the left tail game for the Giants offense, where like Daniel Jones' pressure to sack rate was way higher than it's been in any other game this season. His regular sack rate was 20%. He doesn't have a game above 10% before that. So that's kind of the frame of mind. But statistically speaking, this has not been a particularly dominant Steelers pass rush, at least relative, not as dominant as they've been relative to previous versions of this team. They're 14th in quick pressure rate. They're 19th in pressure disruption rate. Granted, Alex Highsmith missed some time. He's back. Obviously, this is a bad Giants offensive line, but they've done in certain spots, they've been able to kind of mitigate quick pressure. Before Seattle lost the entirety of their defensive line, Daniel Jones was performing well. Before Dallas lost the entirety of their defensive line, Jones again had this kind of quick 2.5 time to throw type style game, as opposed to the 3 seconds that he had last week. So I think there's a path here for the Giants to kind of stay ahead of the chains and as TA said, utilize Daniel Jones's legs and have him kind of throw a bunch of these 7-yard passes. But there are ways in the NFL, and I do trust Brian Daboll as an offensive mind to scheme his way out of the pressure. And I don't think that this pressure is as good as kind of the market anticipates. They're not a top 3 pass rush right now. All of that is to say, on the Giants side, I think there's a path to success. And on the Steelers side, I think the Jets game was a strange anomaly. They certainly hit on most of the kind of moonball type plays. And the Jets were also playing without anyone in the secondary. I don't think Russell Wilson just kind of like is going to be putting together massive yardage, at least per drop back games. I think that was like a real right tail, 90th to 95th percentile style game. And I'm not sure that that's going to continue, or they'll even have that opportunity against a Giants pass rush, which has been amazing. And the Eagles did not win on account of a dominant passing effort. In fact, they threw 14 passes, and Jalen Hurts was sacked on 4 of those dropbacks. I think we can see a game in which we've seen from Wilson a bunch over the last 2-3 years, which is like very similar to Deshaun Watson, like a lot of sacks, not so many turnovers, but plenty of stalled drives, which I think will allow a lot of volume to accumulate on the Giants side of things. That itself can lead to some interesting SGP builds. Not going to focus on those here. Sadly, we don't have passing attempt props available on the SGPs on FanDuel. But I think the play here is basically betting on a fairly low scoring game, but one in which the Giants can move the ball 6-7 yards at a time, and where the Steelers are having are struggling to generate that long vertical passing attack like they had last week, where the Giants can accumulate plenty of play volume and have some success. I'm going to go with Daniel Jones, 250 yards. I think he gets that on attempts alone, and a lot of these kind of 7-yard passes to guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, guys like Malik Neighbors. Also, just for what it's worth on the explosive play front, like Malik Neighbors can take any 12-yard play and go to the house there. Even if they're not connecting on a lot of those deep balls and those things, as they are relatively noisy. We got Daniel Jones, 250, Giants -3.5. And I think in order for this story to play out, the Giants need to be playing from a lead, because if the Giants go down kind of 10-0 and they don't have success passing early on, I think that's precisely where this pass rush advantage can come in for the Steelers. So I think that it is very unlikely for Jones. And certainly if they're not coming out in this style of play of like, let's just try and pass 7 yards at a time, I think it's unlikely that Jones reaches his yards and the Giants are in a game script in which they can win. And then on the bring back, and we've lost a couple of yards here of value, but that's okay. Jalen Warren, I think the Steelers have not yet played in many losing game scripts. If this is one in which they are losing, we are, I think, going to see plenty of receiving work for Warren in the first half of last week when the Steelers did go down. He received nearly 2/3 of the running back routes. And also there is, of course, a chance that he can kind of break a run, and he's still going to get carries. So I like that as a bring back and a little bit of an inverse correlation there. We're telling the story here of the Steelers pass rush not completely dominating the Giants, and for Jones to be able to have some success. Hey, maybe just we need to bet on Danny Dimes on the road, and the problem is the MetLife turf.
Prime time Daniel Jones, though, has also not been a profitable thing. Obviously, everything is individual, so grain of salt with that. But Tia, you have some thoughts also. Chime in, please.
Yeah, just to follow up, I agree with I like the Jalen Warren call a lot. One thing I noticed last week, Russ in his first start used play action on nearly 40% of his dropbacks, which is essentially like number 1 in the league for a full season. And the Giants are number 1 in sack percentage when quarterbacks use play action. So don't turn your back against this pass rush. But I think when he does, last week when he did use play action, it was mainly targeting like guys like Darnell Washington, the tight ends and running backs a lot on kind of those quick, kind of the quick play action. So I do, that does fall in line with what Judah was saying with the Jalen Warren kind of outlier potential from that end. So I absolutely do agree with that. So just wanted to toss that in there, that I thought if they do use play action, it's going to be like those quick ones, because you hold it too long, it gets this pass rush, and he's going to be in big trouble. So
definitely. I can't say I was expecting a Daniel Jones tale, but that's the beauty of what Judah cooks up with these unique looks and alternate perspectives. And there's a reason why that bet is 54-1 people. So keep that in mind as well. That's going to do it for us. Another fantastic show. We appreciate everybody who's in the comments as well. Make sure to hit that like button. Of course, if you're a recurring viewer, if you're a new viewer, thank you for joining us. Click that like button and please subscribe to the channel. Amazing content all week long, including Best Bet show on Wednesday, Prop show with Hitman on Thursdays, and as well as watch alongs for every primetime game. So much fun. Make sure you don't miss out on those. We'll be here same time next week, same exact place. Look forward to seeing you guys, and best of luck with your bets this weekend.